Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hopenning. This is the Hopenning number 90. I am Fran, and this is my beautiful co-host, Marina. And we are here today to bring you hope, which we do very well. And so today we have our wonderful guest, Karla Combres. And Karla is a legacy guide and celebrant. She helps people make the big and small moments in life count and shape their legacy along the way. Through workshops, presentations, one-on-one guidance, and custom ceremonies, she's helped hundreds of individuals, families, couples, and organizations slow down and uncover their essential values and stories in order to live and die meaningfully. Karla is based in Saskatoon, Canada, and is available globally. Welcome, Karla. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'd just like to say a shout out to our friend Linda, who introduced me to you. Thank you, Linda. I love you.
Thanks, Linda. Hello, Marina. Hello, Fran. Nice to be on Hopenning. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you for being here, Karla. It's amazing, and it's always nice to have a fellow Canadian with us. So, but you didn't always live in Saskatoon. So tell us your journey. How did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, well, I did grow up in Saskatoon. It's my hometown. As a little girl, well, if it depends how do you want to know my biographical or my kind of spiritual vocational journey?
What is spiritual vocational?
Yeah.
How did you end up doing what you do today?
Sure. Well, as a little girl, if you had asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would say I wanted to be a part-time preacher, part-time teacher. Part-time preacher, part-time teacher, which is kind of an interesting thing for a little 8-year-old girl to say. You know, I've got an 8-year-old now, and I'm curious about what they want to become. But for me at that time, it was like a knowing, without really knowing what that meant. I wasn't from a religious family. I was from a family of teachers, so it kind of made sense that I could see myself as a teacher. But you know, I grew up. I was a kid who always enjoyed the questions, and that's been a thread throughout my life. In the sense of being a spiritual seeker, finding awe in situations that are outside of religious traditions, you know, in nature, in making music with others, in meaningful conversations, that kind of thing. So it was a thread that carried me through all the way, but I did all the things, you know, I kind of stepped onto that treadmill where, you know, after high school, you do university, and after university, you do this and you get a job, and then I did some traveling and somehow ended up on this path. I spent many years within the federal government in Ottawa, and it just didn't really light me up. You know, I tried to always kind of redirect into something that felt more centered and aligned. We moved overseas to Turkey for a few years. I did my master's there in sociology, and part of my research was interviewing one-on-one oral history interviews with Turkish women, and those lit me up. Like there were always these little sparks where I was like, there's something here. But then we went back to Ottawa. I went back into my job, and finally the break came when I had my second child. We moved to North Carolina to be there for my husband had a scholarship there. And so I was home with 2 young kids. I was away from a government town. I had the chance to kind of rediscover what it was. Because in Ottawa, you know, if you don't like your job, you find another job in government, and it's very easy to just stay within that. So it all came about because I didn't have a lot of time. So I tried to use my time by just really paying attention to these sparks, these kind of heart crumbs that would lead me towards something. And so anytime I sensed a kind of aliveness in someone, even if it wasn't, even if they weren't doing something that I could see myself eventually doing, I just was so curious about their story. So I started taking people out for coffee, and in this way, I discovered hospice. A good friend of mine there was a grief and bereavement counselor, and she said, you know, you might want to consider volunteering with hospice. So I started volunteering with Duke Hospice while there, and I started attending death cafes, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a community event that is really, the purpose of it is to normalize conversations around dying and death. So this conversation that in mainstream society can be uncomfortable, taboo, uncomfortable because it's taboo, but really it's something that we all face in our own lives and in the lives of those we love. And so, yeah, I started hosting or attending those. Then we moved back to Saskatoon. I started hosting death cafes, volunteering with hospice, doing hospice trainings, leading hospice trainings. And then I became, this is all just kind of on the side from my government job, which I was now doing from home. And I was just trying to still kind of feel out. I had no sense. I actually felt a lot of despair at that time, thinking like, how am I ever going to break free? How am I ever going to do something that, like, who's ever going to pay me to just be myself and to lead with my heart and all of that? Like, I just couldn't see how it could work out. But I just kind of kept following these paths. And then I became the death girl, and people were sending me things. Oh, you'd like this, you'd like that. And so I discovered home funerals and did a home funeral practicum. I co-founded a local threshold choir to sing at the bedsides of the seriously ill and dying. So all of these things kind of came together. And through all of this, I discovered the path to becoming a celebrant, which was like, for me, it almost felt like a coming out. It was like it touched something so intimate and vulnerable deep inside, because it felt like all these pieces coming together. I remember I did just a quick weekend training in Edmonton called Designing and Delivering Rites of Passage. And on the way home, I just like tears. And anytime for the next few weeks, as I would tell people about it, it was like, it just felt so right. I mean, it was just the beginning, right? It wasn't like now I've arrived at the summit. No, it was like, but now I'm on the right path. So I trained through the Celebrant Foundation and Institute, and I'm a certified life cycle celebrant. And so in that role, I help, as you mentioned in the intro, Fran, individuals, families, couples to mark their milestones in a meaningful way. So to ditch the script and to really get at the heart of the story and your values and your beliefs, and to lift those up. And so most often I work with people who aren't affiliated with a faith tradition, or maybe their faith tradition doesn't have a ritual to honor this particular milestone. You know, there are the big things that most people come to me for, which are end of life or weddings or baby blessings. But then there are other things, like I'm working with someone right now who is getting married, and she was previously married. She's in a much better place. She's with a lovely person that she's about to step into this new life with. But there's something still kind of unfinished for her. And so we're talking about rituals to just bookend that previous relationship so that she can step more fully into this new one. You know, say goodbye before she can say hello. Or, you know, I've worked with somebody who wanted to, as he was becoming a father, really own his manhood, his adulthood, and he wanted to talk about just personal rituals. So it can be, you know, the type of ceremony that you imagine, where you've got all your gathered community and you're saying your vows or you're doing your eulogy or whatever, but it can also be really personal, intimate. So I've been doing this through ceremony designing, officiating, and then also just one-on-one guidance to help people kind of figure out what they want to do for themselves. I'm talking a lot here, but I'm almost done.
I love it. Keep going.
Yeah. So I was saying before that I became the death girl, and then now I've sort of become the milestone person, and I realized actually as much as all those milestones to me, like what death um what draws me to end of life stuff and what drew me to it a, a decade ago when I started getting into all of this was that it's a time of life where all of the superficialities of life just kind of fade away and we can become crystal clear on what matters and who matters. So if you haven't done the work leading up to it, it's like, okay, now or never, right? So that's where a lot of people finally have that kind of reckoning. But I believe that we can do that throughout our lives. And so that's what I try to get at in the ceremonies that I do, is get at the heart of and holding all of those. You know, a wedding is not only joyful, we're also letting go of so much. A funeral is not only sad, we're celebrating a life sometimes well lived, sometimes very complicated, and we can do both, right? And we can do that every day. It doesn't have to be a milestone moment. And so as a legacy guide, that's what I'm doing, is I'm trying to help people uncover like what is essential for you, and are you living into that, so that when you get to the end of your life, you don't have these regrets, and you know that you've cultivated with intention a life that is aligned with who you are uniquely. So there you go. There's my spiel.
Well, Karla, when we had talked before, you had talked about the Death Cafe, which is quite an idea in itself. I had never heard about the Death Cafe before. And I didn't even know they existed. And they seem a little macabre, you know, like, did people show up wearing goth and, you know, like that kind of an outfit? Or what is this Death Cafe really about? And it sounds quite interesting.
Well, when I first heard about it too, that was what I wondered, like, who's going to show up at this thing? And I was so pleasantly surprised. My curiosity got the better of me. I went, and it was, that particular one was a really nice, intimate group. We were about 8 people in a circle, all walks of life, all life experiences. The idea is that you are, as a host, you're not proselytizing or selling any products or services. You're just creating a safe space. And there's always something to break the ice: coffee, tea. You know, we commune over food, right? Just as we do in our family lives, in our community. So there's always food there. We don't direct the conversations, but if you go on my, somewhere now buried in my Instagram, I've got a recording, an audio recording from the very first one I ever hosted, which I did here in Saskatoon with a local bereavement counselor, Lisa Gregg. We did a number of them, and the energy in the room, like mid conversation, I just recorded from the back of the room, so you can't hear any private conversations. You can just hear the energy of the people talking. Like, it is definitely not macabre. There's laughter, there are tears. People are talking about their own experiences, their own fears, what they wish for in their death, what their advanced healthcare directives to be. So there's like, it goes from the practical to the spiritual to the paranormal to the, intimate experience. So I would say that was sort of my inroad into this whole world around holistic living and dying. And it's really blossomed since then around the world. I'm not sure how familiar, it could be because I'm kind of in it, how you get into your little community and you think that that's all there is. But there are death cafes, there's death over dinner. I've got an app on my phone that reminds me 5 times a day that I'm going to die. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on to reclaim this part of our life that we've kind of institutionalized, handed over, and tried to kind of push away, that people are now seeing the benefits of welcoming in and integrating the lessons of mortality.
There's so much that you said, even in that first introduction of yourself, Karla, that I kind of wanted to touch on. And it made me think of my introduction into the concept of death was when a pet died. And it was never discussed. It was never explained. And that was a very depressive situation in my life, where as a young child, losing a pet and then having a kind of an explanation of death. And then suddenly the idea that nobody's going to live, everybody will die, including myself. That was a hard one for me. And I struggled with it for quite a while. In fact, I started to really fear death. But a lot of has happened since then. And, how do you, in what you do, as well as in these death cafes, how do you turn it into something that's not depressive, that has a positive message?
I think in everything that I do, the death cafes are somewhat on the back burner right now. I'm not actively doing them at the moment. But in everything I do, story is so essential. And I think that anytime when it comes to matters of the heart, that we try to message or scale to a point that it's going to touch everybody, you lose the heart of it. And I think the hope lies in really connecting with what's true for an individual. And so in my work, when it's one-on-one in a call, or as I'm helping people design a ceremony or do, their own memorial or whatever I'm working on, we do a real deep dive. And when it's with small groups in workshops and whatnot, there's a lot of reflection, sharing. So helping people to I don't have anybody else's truth, but I'm trying to help them uncover it for themselves. And so I think the hope, there's always hope available, because as we dive into our story, we see that it's not the end of the story. There's always more to come, and that we can use whatever's happened in our lives to inform how we move forward. Yeah.
So Karla, like as you speak, I think about two camps of people. The people that really do believe in something after death, right? That we become part of, whatever is out there, part of the light, right? Or we reconnect with our ancestors or loved ones that have gone before us. That camp that really does believe that we walk through a veil. And then there's the other camp. I find this camp much bigger, but there is this camp that really does believe there's nothing else. This is the earth, and that's it. When we're done, we're done. I've got a couple of questions for you. Which people have you found in your past, in the work that you do? Which group of people really experience more joy right here and now? Like, is there a measuring gauge? And which people are more worried about the next phase? Like, because I'm just here in my little bubble and I only see, bits and pieces, but you see a lot more people.
Yeah, I don't know actually that if I have an answer to that question, who experiences more joy or more fear. What I will say is that first camp that you described, of the people who believe in something bigger than us, all of that is probably much bigger than we realize, because a lot of people don't have language to describe what they believe. They might think, I don't belong to a religion, I'm not a religious person, and therefore I don't, we have a real lack of language, and also there's so much baggage around language. When I start talking with people about when I try to tap into what's bigger, what's transcendent for them, I usually have to really offer a whole bunch of different words to describe, because if I just use sacred or I just use spirit, it can immediately be a no-go for people. And so that's where I try to find for them what is transcendent. And I think even those people who believe this is it, this is there's nothing after this, can still experience deep meaning, transcendence in their relationships, an energy between and around that doesn't have to be named spiritual even, right? So your question again was around joy and fear. I think, if I think about my memorial ceremonies, sometimes really difficult situations, and I wrestle with them. Like, this is as much my personal journey of learning and growing with everyone, right? Every situation is so different. And sometimes I think, God, it would just be so much easier if they believed in a God in heaven and their person is there and they're going to see them when they die. Like, that is a really neat and tidy narrative that would really be much easier. And that's just not the case for most people. I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm saying for most people, that is not, or for most people who come to me, they come to me because they don't know where to begin, because they don't have that dogma or structure to neatly fit into. And so then we really need to find, like, what is it that's essential? And then for those people who don't believe in any afterlife, well, then the meaning comes in what did the life that was left, that was lived mean for those of us who are left behind? What is their legacy, and how can that inform our living? Does that make sense? I don't know if that kind of gets an answer to the question, but
I agree with what you said, because I was raised the way I was raised, right? Always with the belief that I always had that belief that there was somebody on the other side waiting for me to welcome me, right? And so I never have experienced not believing. I've never experienced that. And what you do say about it would be just so much easier if you did believe that there was something else. I've tried that. I've tried that on the people that don't believe, and they don't want to go there. And it's like you said, sometimes those words, just the word sacred, or the word anything having to do with a church or anything like that, is just a trigger
yes.
word for them. And it's just not good to go there. And I wrestle with that myself, is how, I guess it's love, right, Marina? We always talk about love on our show, just to love them where they are, and walk that journey with them wherever they are on that walk, in love, so that we can be, and I don't even want to use the word blessing, because even the word blessing sometimes is a trigger, right?
Yeah.
So life is tough. Life is a hard thing. And I just wanted to point out, since the last time we talked, Karla, which was less than a week ago, I found out myself that my niece has stage 4 cancer. So it's like, wow, right? So it's just all the time. The life that we have is so unpredictable, and we just don't know what's coming up around the corner.
Yeah.
So you talked earlier about it's the dying that informs our living. So what does that really mean?
I think if you've ever experienced the death of a loved one, or maybe an illness where your own mortality was right in front of you, people are changed by that forever. And it's much more sort of in their awareness, their conscious awareness. And so it like you just said, even your niece's, I'm sorry to hear about your niece. Her diagnosis just is a reminder to you that, geez, and things can change on a dime, and everything is unpredictable. And how now can I let that inform how I choose to spend this precious life? As Mary Oliver said, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? So that's what I mean by dying can inform your living. And if you haven't experienced that, serious illness or death of a loved one close to you, well, we're all going there. And there are things that we can do to bring it more into our awareness, like Death Cafe, like the app. I run a workshop called Orient Your Life, Rest in Peace. And we look at the top regrets of the dying. What were the people who had big regrets at the end of life? What were they? What makes a meaningful life? So what for people who lived a life that they get to a ripe old age and they, feel satisfied with how they've lived, with relationships they've cultivated, all of those things. What were those pillars? And then look at your own life and start to say, okay, what are my priorities in life? And then actually drill down and see on the daily or weekly or whatever, on the regular, am I actually taking actions that reflect and address those values and beliefs that I say that I have? And most of us aren't 100% doing that, right? We ebb and we flow, and life changes and throws us curveballs, and that's okay and that's normal. But what can I do to bring myself more into alignment with intention, with consciousness? And so we talk about really tangible things that you can do to do that, to bring yourself more into alignment. And then that way, your dying is informing your living.
So there are so many interesting thoughts that goes through my head as you are talking, and one of them is, in my life, in my work, it's obviously helping people to live their best version of themselves, but 90%, 99% of them don't have that proverbial gun against their head of a diagnosis of the clock is running out. And I used to work with seniors. I was in the senior industry for quite a while earlier in my life, and until 2016. And one of the things that was very hard for me was that you build this relationship with a person, and so many of them passed away. I at one point I directed a choir for senior men, and I think they were all pretty much in their 80s.
Wow.
And out of all of them, there are maybe 2 left today. And, that was hard for me. And even now, when I catch up with somebody and they tell me, that you hear this person passed away, that person passed away, sometimes it's hard for me to, it touches me, and because I'm a singer, I sang at so many funerals in my life. So how do you take care of you? How do you protect that empathetic part of you when that is your job, to deal with people on a daily basis who has that time running out and who is facing that? And how do you protect yourself? How do you do self-care?
I think it's important to be touched by those things. And of course, there are things, and I'll talk about that in a moment, about, looking after myself. And I'm curious to know what you do too, but because I could always be better. But I think a big part of my work too, and my responsibility in this, is to help the community, not only the people I'm working with directly, but their people, to empower them and become better at being uncomfortable, at being with grief. That grief journey can be so lonely for people. And often the people around them, they show up for the first couple of weeks, and then that tapers off, and then they're walking in the wilderness on their own. And there are so many beautiful resources out there for really becoming a companion, as a friend, as a layperson, a family member. There are really beautiful ways that we can support each other. And knowing that this is just part of our shared humanity, that in that being touched, it connects us. And those connections are essential for meaningful living. So I never want to lose that empathetic part of me that will be touched. And I hope that in being touched also, and letting people see that, I mean, I don't stand up there in a blubbering mess. I'm not that kind of being touched, but I do feel, deeply. And sometimes there are tears. But I always remember that this is their story, and I'm here to be a compassionate presence, to listen deeply, and to reflect in my presence this idea that this isn't the end of your story, because that does give hope that this is, I'm on a journey. There's movement here. And Fran, I think it was you who mentioned earlier about people not wanting to go there, people not wanting to, use certain language being triggering. So really pacing at the pace that they are setting, that I don't have an agenda in the direction we're going or whatever. So by really reminding myself that I am a companion, this is not my journey, this is their journey, but I'm walking alongside and letting them lead. I really try not to get wrapped up in, this is my responsibility to solve all the problems for you, because that can be overwhelming, because there are usually no clear answers, right? So maintaining those kind of boundaries around my journey, your journey. I love to sing like you, Marina. That for me, that's a part of my spiritual practice, which I have a busy life with 3 young kids and don't do enough of it. But when I do, and when I get in the zone, and I'm sure you've experienced it, maybe Fran, you have, through music or some other
Fran
thing.
has a beautiful voice as well.
Yeah. You know that feeling like when the harmonies just come together and nobody's even thinking about it, it's just happening, and you get into that flow state, is for me my favorite. So I try to sing, to be in nature, to have quiet time every day. I love to read. And like I said, this is really all a part of my spiritual practice. I since I was a little girl, always wanted these meaningful connections with people, and I am so lucky in my work to have people just open their hearts to me and to share what's on their heart, and we establish these beautiful connections. So I think all of that is part of my self-care.
So you also then deal with grief and the families after the passing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, grief to me, and that's a question I get a lot of times, I call it the shapeshifter, because today you may be okay, but tomorrow you may be falling apart. This morning you may be okay, tonight you may be falling apart. It's so unpredictable. It's not a constant. It's a moving piece until it becomes less prominent, until it moves. I don't think it ever leaves. I just think it moves a little bit to the background. So how do you guide families through grief?
I would say similar to what I just said, being a compassionate presence, not assuming, coming with a curious mind, a beginner's mind, to sometimes just be in silence. Sometimes it's conversation, letting them, and through sort of questions that help to tease out what their person meant to them. Lots of storytelling, just lots and lots of storytelling, really, before we ever get, if it's a ceremony that we're working toward, that the nuts and bolts of the ceremony comes much, much later, after we've established a connection, after I've really feel like I've gotten to know their person. I feel like I get to know these people and wish that I'd known them in their living, yeah. And being open to like I said, beginner's mind. But when you come with this kind of openness, people inevitably feel safe to touch what is creative inside of them. Like, so I have so many examples of families who just come up with these beautiful words to say, or on the spur of the moment in a ceremony, we'll do something that, we hadn't planned, but it just fits the moment because they felt moved to do so. And so I see it as my role to really create this space where we can touch what's here and lead with our hearts, not our heads, you know? Yeah. And so being with grieving families is like that. It's opening, it's really communicating that I'm not scared by your grief, and I'm ready to just sit and be present to it in whatever way that it takes, in whatever shape it's shifting into at this moment. Yeah.
As you speak, Karla, and you talked about holding space and being a compassionate presence, I could just imagine how that would, like, somewhere in my past, right? How memories come up. I think I can remember losing someone close, and it might have been my grandpa because I was only 4 when he died. I remember crawling up into my mom's lap, not understanding death at all. I was just this little person, right? Crawling into my mom's lap and just sitting there and just touching her face, like, because these tears were just running down her face, and just touching her face and looking into her eyes. And as you're speaking, I can just imagine that is the beauty of a small child, right? And when you hold your compassionate presence for someone, that's really what you're doing. You're just holding their face, letting them cry, and touching
That's so
their
beautiful. Yeah.
skin, and just being present for them in their grieving.
Yes.
No matter what that would look like as an adult, going into my later years, right? I mean, as Marina knows, I come from a huge family. I'm one of the tail end of us, but all of us are 60 plus. So I've got several family members who are in their 70s, and they're baby boomers, and they've been have very productive lives, and they're looking behind them thinking, I only have this much left. And they're getting into that place where they're becoming very reflective on their own lives.
Yeah.
And I think what you said before, these milestones, like the little milestones that we used to celebrate as part of a sacred community, within the church or whatever, they're not there anymore. Like, our kids are not getting baptized anymore. They're not getting all those rites that they used to get within a sacred, church space or whatever. So how do you mark those? Because rituals are important. They are super important. And because we have tossed out the Catholic Church with a capital C, or all those churches, because of problems. There were problems. It seems to me that we've forgotten about the celebrating moments the way we used to do it. So how do you celebrate those moments with people to help us to remember rituals are important in some way or another?
Yeah. Okay. A few things come up. First of all, what a beautiful story of you as a little girl holding your mom's face. And what a gift to your mom in that moment for her, And you're right, that is exactly that. That I try to keep that curiosity and openness and lovingness of a child. And I hope she was able to just really receive that from you. And it's interesting because I feel like there's a huge juxtaposition from what you shared, Marina, at the beginning when your pet died, and it just wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
Like, it never happened, and there was no place for that grief to go. And so, yeah, we need to get better as companions, as you're doing in your work and I'm doing in my work, and just as society in general. It's up to all of us to really get better at being more comfortable in the presence of Dr. Joanne Cacciatore calls it bearing the unbearable. You know, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. You're not actually making a difficult situation better, but you're being with it, right? So anyway, those were just a couple things that came up. But in terms of the marking the milestones, I think just the bringing intention to it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I shared with you earlier this person that I'm working with who feels like she needs to do something to energetically kind of release the past in order to step into her present, into the new marriage. And we were kind of just brainstorming different ideas, and I was kind of asking her questions to get at what she might want to do. And I said, like, it doesn't have to be, it can just be the two of us together. I think it's important to sort of be witnessed in it. Or gather in your closest inner circle of people, have a fire in your backyard, and share what you're letting go of, throw it in the fire or whatever. Like, there's lots of different ideas, but let them know in your invitation, this is what's going on. Because what we do in our day-to-day, we have a birthday party, we all know what it's supposed to look like, we have the cake, we blow the candles, we sing the song, and we move on. Or we have a baby shower is a very good example of this, of like the ultimate transition in a woman's life that is reduced to putting chocolate bars in diapers and, you know, stupid baby shower games that don't honor the moment, right? We miss so many opportunities to connect more deeply and make meaning. And so I was saying to her, you know, we haven't sort of come up with what she wants to do yet. She's still now thinking about after our conversation. But in whatever you do, if you're inviting people in to this, let them know in your invitation. So you're preparing, right? And then you're letting people choose too. Do I want to be part of this or not? Am I prepared to be present to this or not? So, you know, you could say, I want to invite you, my trusted friends who've been there with me from the beginning, who've seen this journey for me. I need to let go of some things before I step into this beautiful new marriage. Can you come and be with me and hear what I have to say? Can I hear words of support from you, or whatever it might be, you know? Another example is a few years ago, my mom turned 70. And so we were having a dinner. We invited my sister's family. We invited some of their nearest and dearest friends, her siblings. And in the invitation, I said, you know, that we're having mom's 70th. Could you please come with come prepared to share 2 qualities you love about her and a story to go with each of those qualities.
Nice.
So people knew coming in that there was going to be a moment for this, right? And then at a certain point, we'd had our meal. My sister and my kids and her kids and I had prepared a couple songs to sing at the end, to kind of celebrate at the end. But before we did that, I said, okay, it's kind of like the moment where you would have a toast, but it's elevating that to meet the moment. And so we went around the table, and some people were nervous. There were a few tears. Like, it moves you to get at the heart, right? And that's totally okay. But it sure connected the room, and it sure helped my mom to feel honored and to experience the love that was there for her, right? So I think there are ways that we can mark these milestones, even the small ones, you know, because a lot of people, if they've stepped away from a religion, they've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater and think, well, we don't need rituals and we don't need this and that. And when they think ceremony, they only think end of life, wedding, or baby blessing. But you're right, there are these other moments where we can bring intention and mindfulness to them, to just elevate them and experience them more deeply. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Karla. We are at the end of our wonderful chat with you. And thank you for giving us so much hope in the subject of death through what you do. And just lastly, how can people get hold of you?
Right. Thank you for asking that. And thanks for having me here. I have a website, so it's my first name is spelled with a K, so it's Karla, and my last name is Combres, COMBRES.com. And if people want to work with me, I'm available for one-on-one guidance just by the hour. And I also run workshops. So I do, sometimes they're online, sometimes they're in person. The one I mentioned earlier, Orient Your Life, Rest in Peace. And I'm also starting in January running memoir writing workshops where people can start really exploring on a weekly basis the story of their own life and begin capturing that and writing that and integrating that in a safe community container. And that'll be online starting in January. So to watch my website for that. And if people would like to get on my mailing list, they can sign up for that on my website as well. Just hit the contact me button, and I would love to start a conversation.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Karla, what's one last message of hope you have for our viewers or people who have just turned in for the first time? I mean, if we have something that's, hovering over our heads like a death of a loved one or ourselves, right? What's a message of hope that you can give them, maybe to hold compassionate space for them on the other side of our screen right now?
Wow, that's a great conversation. Or yeah, it could lead into a big conversation, a whole nother one. So how do I synthesize this? I would say to remember that this is the end of your story, and to not try to turn away from whatever is causing you pain or stirring something inside of you, but to walk through it. And that if you need a companion on your journey, find the people who will support you, whether it's a professional or a family member or friend who can be there with you to walk you through it. We need each other, and none of us can go through this life on our own. And so sort of letting go of the need to be everything and do everything for everyone, and to take care of yourself, and remember that there's so much more story ahead of you. And by being present to what is, we can let that inform how we make changes, how we live going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Thank you very much,
Beautiful.
both of you, for having me. And I look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation someday. And I wish you all
That
the
sounds
best.
wonderful. I have so many more questions, and thank you again for the amazing work that you do, Karla. Thank you, Fran, and your friend Linda for steering us in Karla's direction. It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karla. And
thank you.
Thank you for the work you do.
It's my pleasure. It really is.
And thank you, everybody, for watching today and listening. Whatever you do, we're very happy to bring some hope into your world. And if you like what we do, please subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.